evening. Thank you for joining us at this week's Surrey Police Live. I'm your host for this evening. My name is Louise Gibbons and I work in the Community Safety team at Surrey County Council. I'm now going to get the rest of the panel to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Joe at the end. If you could just introduce yourself, tell us who you work for and what your role is.
Of course I can do. Hi everyone, my name's Jo Grimshaw. I'm Head of Antisocial Behaviour and Partnerships for Surrey Police. What that means is I strategically look at how Surrey Police deliver antisocial behaviour, that's tackling it and supporting the victims. And I also have an operational team of ASB specialists who help work with police officers and with our partners to look at the tactical options to deal with offenders of antisocial behaviour.
Thanks, Joe. And Paul, can you tell us what your role is?
Certainly can. Evening. I'm Paul Smith. I'm Community Safety Officer based at Spelthorne Borough Council. My role is similar to Joe's, but probably a little bit lower level, probably the first point of contact to many members of the public and other partner agencies to help alleviate local problems.
Thanks, Paul. And lastly, Anne.
Hi, my name's Anne Jones. I'm the Director of Services of Mediation Surrey. We're a local charity that delivers services to people who are in dispute with neighbours and suffering from antisocial behaviour. And the key services that we offer around antisocial behaviour and neighbour dispute mediation and our support coaching service. So we work closely with statutory partners to support victims while they look at how to deal with perpetrators of antisocial behaviour.
Lovely, thanks Anne. So just to give you an idea of what we will be discussing in our session tonight, we're going to be talking about what antisocial behaviour is, different types of antisocial behaviour, who deals with those different types of antisocial behaviour, what is currently being done to tackle it across Surrey, and what you can do in your communities, because often they do hold the key to some of the solutions to the problems that we tackle on a daily basis. Do ask questions in the comments section on Facebook as we go through, and we will attempt to answer as many as we can as we're going through. We're now going to see a short video of Surrey Police Cadet Holly talking about the role of cadets within policing and the importance of youth organisations like the Cadets.
My name's Holly and I'm Head Cadet of Runnymede Unit within the Surrey Police Volunteer Cadets. So I've been with the Cadets since the start, so since November 2016, and I've been Head Cadet since about April 2017. Within Police Cadets we learn a lot to do with rank structure and the structure within the police to start off with, and then we'll gradually progress to learn more specialised things with specialised units such as the ASB unit, the police dogs unit, the firearms unit. And we'll also learn about drill and how to do that, as well as how we can promote police and give them a positive outlook within the community when we go to community events. So within the antisocial behaviour input we were given, we learn all about the different types of antisocial behaviour. We learn all about the law to do with antisocial behaviour. We learn the punishments and the consequences of antisocial behaviour and what could be carried on from. One of the things that surprised me about antisocial behaviour is the many different types that it can take. So things like drug dealing could be considered antisocial behaviour, which I didn't realise would be. I thought it would just come under maybe the Misuse of Drugs Act or something like that rather than antisocial behaviour. Youth organisations like the Cadets are really important in keeping people out of antisocial behaviour because it means that they don't have as much time to be able to get bored and go and commit antisocial behaviour. It also means that they are exposed to lots of different people with lots of different values that they may not experience at home, which then makes them a more rounded person. And it also means that if they're maybe not getting the best values from home or from the community around them, they're exposed to things that might help them learn discipline and maybe respect for others and respect for the law. Once I leave the Cadets, I hope to go on to become a cadet leader and then go on to university to become a primary school teacher.
So this leads us into our first discussion point for the evening, which is what is antisocial behaviour? So I think, Joe, I'm going to start with you if you wouldn't mind, as our police lead for ASB. If you could just give us an overview of the definitions of ASB and maybe throw in there a little bit about what isn't?
Yeah, of course I can do. So I think the first thing we'll look at is what the law says is antisocial behaviour, because that's quite important if we are looking at legislation to tackle antisocial behaviour, because we have to have a test that the courts will want us to adhere to. So the test or the definition under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014 is any behaviour that causes or likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress. And what's really important for us as practitioners is that word likely to. Because what that means is that us as professionals can give evidence on behalf of communities, on behalf of individuals who are quite rightly may be too scared to come forward and give live evidence at court. So the legislation allows us to use hearsay because of that likely to cause. So that's what the law says, which is really important. But I think what is also important is actually what do people in the community, you know, the people are residents, what does that actually really mean to them and kind of day to day, in their day to day lives, and how that impacts. So what we talk about in Surrey is it's behaviour that has a destructive element to it. So, you know, it's about the alarm, harassment, stress, but it's also about, is it affecting somebody's quality of life? So it doesn't matter what the behaviour is. You know, it could be noise, it could be litter, it could be nuisance neighbours, but actually what is the impact and the harm on that individual? And if it's having harm, then it's antisocial behaviour. So I think that's what we look at in Surrey, is not so much what the legal term is, but actually what is the impact on somebody's life that somebody else is having, so that offender of antisocial behaviour is having on them. So for instance, we have come across victims who are scared to go out at night because of the individuals or the groups of people that are hanging around in their communities. We have people that turn the lights off at night because they're too scared that people will know they're in and they might try and knock on the door and try and get in. So we look at the impact actually rather than the types of antisocial behaviour when we're looking at dealing with victims.
Paul, from a local authority perspective, what are the most sort of common antisocial behaviour issues that you find yourself dealing with?
It's quite wide ranging. I would say neighbour disputes is a main one. Can be late night noise, parties, people shouting abuse over the garden fence, the archetype ones, speeding cars, erratic driving, out of control bonfires, drunkenness in town centres, our local parks, and just verbal threatening behaviour. So it's a wide range of behaviour. But going back to Joe's comment, if it's impacting on somebody's sort of well-being, then it's antisocial behaviour.
Yeah. So as far as reporting antisocial behaviour is concerned, when would it be a matter for the police, and when would it be a matter for the local authority? When might it be for somebody else entirely?
That's a very good question, Lou, and I think that's kind of why we're here and why it's kind of National ASB Week, because it sometimes can be quite confusing about who the best person is to call. So I think if it's happening at that time, you're fearful, you're worried, then the police are the right people to call. But it could actually be that as police we don't have the tools and powers that maybe our housing colleagues have, or our local authority colleagues. So if that kind of risk of harm and fear is not at the point where you're having the antisocial behaviour, it could be that actually the police are not the first point of call that you could go to. But we do understand that it can be really difficult sometimes for people to know who the first person or the first agency is to call. And that's, again, as we go through tonight, you'll see some websites where there's some really good information that will help you make that decision about who best you call at the first instance.
Thanks, Joe. Anne, from a perspective of your service, what are the most common disputes that you're mediating in relation to ASB?
So by a long lead, noise is the biggest one, and that often divides into amplified sound on the one hand, so sort of loud music, stuff like that, and then domestic noise as well, which would be more, you can hear things going on in the next door house that you wouldn't really want to.
Yeah.
So noise is always top of the list for mediation disputes. But then the other things that come up, very much what Paul mentioned, rubbish, children's behaviour, vehicles, smells often, and we've had a lot of during lockdown. We had a lot of complaints about the smell of cannabis from next door. So sometimes issues around drug use, not so much around drug dealing, but more around drug use.
Yeah, and the nuisance.
And the nuisance that causes, the impact that has on people if it comes through the walls, or you can smell it in the garden all the time.
So it's that kind of stuff that won't meet sort of a threshold for a statutory environmental nuisance, but it's still affecting the quality of life of people.
Yes, I mean, mediation is most appropriate where it's likely to be possible, with a bit of help for the people involved to have a conversation about what's been going on, for the person who's suffering to be able to let the other person know the impact it's having, and for them to work together to try to find a solution to the problem without having to involve the authorities. That's when mediation is most appropriate.
Okay. Thanks for that, Anne.
Should I say something about the coaching as well?
Oh yeah, please do.
So the coaching service is more appropriate where mediation is not likely to work. So that's really there to support people who are suffering because of perhaps more serious antisocial behaviour, or situations where mediation wouldn't be appropriate for some reason. And there it's about supporting people to find ways of being more resilient to deal with it, and to make sure that they're getting what they should be getting from the enforcement agencies.
Thanks, Anne. We've had a question from Mary King on Facebook, who's asked if we were aware of egg throwing at houses in Pound Crescent in Fetcham, which is in Mole Valley. Thank you for your question, Mary. I'm not sure it's something that we can answer right this second, but we can certainly make inquiries and respond to you later.
Can I just come in on that?
Yeah,
Look, I just have to say, because for some people they think that's trivial, but that's impacting on somebody's quality of life big time.
Of course.
And it may not strictly fall in the definition of any criminal offence, but to me that is really important. That's something certainly in Spelthorne we'd be keen to pick up and try and help somebody, because I always have this sort of rule that in your own house you'd be able to lock the door and live in your own house in peace and quiet, and if that doesn't happen, then that's something that needs dealing with.
I completely agree, and it can be quite intimidating depending on who's doing it. Okay, so now it's time for our second video on some of the ways in which the police and partners work together to solve issues such as antisocial behaviour. Here you will hear from Borough Commanders Bert Dean and Maxine Siller talking about JAG and CHARM.
Hello, I'm Bert Dean, I'm the local Borough Commander for Elmbridge. I'm here to talk about what the Joint Action Group is, which we sometimes call the JAG. This is a meeting that is held in every single district and borough across Surrey, looking at problem places and problem issues. At the meeting, we have many representatives, not just the police, but we have Surrey Fire and Rescue, local district and boroughs representatives, Surrey County Council, Environment Agency, and any other agency or organisation that we would work with to try and solve the issue. The purpose of JAG is to look at issues such as antisocial behaviour, to listen to the community, look at the crime trends, look at where the hotspots are, and put in measures to tackle that and resolve the issue as much as we can, rather than just sticking a plaster over it. Try and find something for the long term to tackle the antisocial behaviour issue.
Hi, I'm Maxine Siller, and I'm the Spelthorne Borough Commander based at Staines Police Station in North Surrey. I'm going to talk to you today about one of the meetings that Surrey Police participates in with all of our expertise from our local partners to help us look at antisocial behaviour and problem people and families across our communities. The meeting that I'm going to talk to you about is called the Community Harm and Risk Management Meeting, otherwise shortened and sometimes known as the CHARM. In this meeting, all of the persons sit round a table, and with a panel of expertise, they talk and look at the issues that may arise in local families and peoples and problems. Some of the things that we talk about in this meeting are often things like persons displaying antisocial behaviour through their noise, through the pollution of the local environment, maybe their rubbish, or even from behaviours such as alcohol abuse, or maybe large parties constantly in their properties. With the experts around the table, we can look at alternative interventions that may not be available to us through the criminal processes, but actually through some of the civil remedies, such as injunctions, or maybe even looking at whether community-based orders are available for us. And it's in these discussions that we decide which way and the best way we can deal with these issues to help and enhance the life experiences of people who live in our local community.
So before we go on to our next discussion point, we've had another question that's come in through Facebook. It says, a number of people around my house smoke drugs near my back garden and it gives me a really bad headache. Is it legal to smoke outdoors or in your own home?
So the very simple question to that is no, it's not legal. It is still illegal, but there are two parts to this. There's the legality and the cannabis issue, but there's also the smell, the noxious smell. And I think that's what we need to concentrate rather than what the drug is of type. But the fact is that smell is impacting. That called it, the person that's asking that question is kind of quality of life. So we talk about that quality of life again. So there are things that we can do to kind of help with that situation. I don't know whether Paul, you want to?
Yeah, I just think the person needs to report it to whatever borough, and I think as the whole bit we're talking about tonight, I think the crux is this is about impact as opposed to the actual offence itself. There's ways to resolve this through legislation. Some of the new antisocial behaviour legislation is useful, and that certainly in Spelthorne, our experience, we use a thing called a community protection warning notice without getting too technical, and that helps, I would say, 90% of the cases to resolve the issue. So whoever the caller is, report it into your local council, and they should be able to pick that up for you.
I think one of the important things for me as well is sometimes things like that can seem like low level, but we know from experience as professionals that antisocial behaviour can often be hiding more serious crimes. So I don't know, Joe, if you want to give a little bit of insight from your experience of the sort of more serious crime that you've uncovered as a result of what at first appears to be just low-level ASB or nuisance.
Yeah, so we try not to use the word low level when it comes to antisocial behaviour, because it's never low level, especially to the people that are kind of experiencing it. But I think what we've learnt over the years by listening to victims is that actually people can be really tolerant and they don't want to make a fuss, by the time somebody actually gets the strength or is at their wits' end and they are trying to report it to them, they will have had a crime, whether it's harassment, it might be a public order offence, but we've also found hate crime hidden in what at the start is just a low-level incident of antisocial behaviour. But actually when you start talking to the victim, there are some what we call hidden crimes in there. And again, we've done a lot of work training our police officers to not only look at the harm of the incident, but also to make sure that if there is any hidden crime in there, that is also reported and dealt with. Because probably what most people don't know out there is, as a victim of antisocial behaviour, you're not afforded the same rights as a victim of crime under the Victims Code. There is some work going on nationally to lobby the government to change that, but at the moment, as a victim of ASB, your rights are slightly lower than a victim of crime. So I think it's really important that in Surrey we kind of recognise that.
Yeah.
Can I pick up something around
Of
that?
course.
Because I think listening to you, Joe, it's good to hear that police officers are getting that training and linking stuff up, because what we hear from a lot of victims is that they report numerous incidents, but each incident they're told is not a crime. And it's so they feel that it's kind of written off and not taken seriously, and often say to us that they don't feel that the police take an overview. So it's great to hear that is something that's being worked on, because it is a very common experience, and it often has the impact that people then feel like no one's listening, so they give up reporting. And I think one of the things we wanted to get across tonight really is how important it is to keep reporting and to keep telling the authorities that stuff is happening.
Definitely.
It is so important, because one report can be seen as quite insignificant, and like you say, if people feel they're not being listened to, they might not report future incidents. But the more reports that come in, the more of a picture appears, and the more likely are to have a response. I've actually got a question for you, Anne, that's come in from Keith Rockhill on Facebook, and he's actually asked how he can become a mediator or a volunteer in the mediation service. He's an emotional support specialist, and he'd love to get involved in
Oh, brilliant.
some way.
Well, so if you go to our website, and I don't know whether those details will be posted at the end of this or not, yes, I'm
Yeah.
hearing you will, then it will tell you how to become a mediator. You can email us on info@mediationsurrey.org and say you're interested in becoming a mediator. And if you do that, then one of our team will get in touch with you and let you know when we're next going to be training.
Thanks, Anne.
Brilliant.
So now we're going to have a discussion about the different tools and powers that we have available to us to tackle antisocial behaviour. As you've already alluded to, Joe, there's a range of tools and powers available, but they're distributed across different agencies. So Surrey Police have some tools and powers, local authority have some tools and powers. So I think, Paul, we'll start with you this time, if you like.
Please do.
So I wonder if maybe you could talk a little bit about the JET team and some of the tools and powers that they have available to them to use.
Okay, yeah. The JET team, it stands for Joint Enforcement Team, and most boroughs and local authorities now have these. In essence, they're really the enforcement arm of the local councils. I think it's important, I know we were going to talk about some of the multi-agency meetings here, but if we discuss a problem, and some of the antisocial behaviour problems, there's lots of different factors in them, and different agencies can offer different parts, but certainly from the JET team, certainly where I work in Spelthorne Borough Council, they may pick up things like litter and fly tipping, which seems to be a bugbear for lots of people at the moment. We've recently introduced a thing called a public space protection order to deal with the use of nitrous oxide canisters that was prevalent in the borough, and we're working with police and other partner agencies to resolve those. Elsewhere within the councils, you'll have environmental health, who can deal with things like statutory nuisance, that may deal with noise. It's other issues such as out of control bonfires, etc. So there's a wide range of powers and abilities. The biggest thing, I think, the message is it's not just one agency, it's us working together to resolve it.
It's very rare that you get an antisocial behaviour issue that's just a single agency response.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's complicated, and the best thing about having the multi-agency meetings is we can speak, problem solve together and come out with the best solution to help the local resident.
And Joe, from a police perspective, what are the tools and powers that you find are most valuable in your toolkit?
So in my toolkit, well, in my team's toolkit, so as I've alluded to, I've got 8 ASB specialists, and probably the two main pieces of the ASB legislation they will use is one is called the Criminal Behaviour Order, and this is what we use on offenders of antisocial behaviour to deal with the kind of behaviour that they are causing. So we have to have a conviction, but when they go to court and they are convicted, we can apply to the court. If we can show that they have caused alarm, harassment and distress, we can put some conditions on. So if for instance somebody's going to a local shopping area and is causing antisocial behaviour, or they're aggressively shoplifting, we can ask the courts, because their behaviour has caused, or remember likely to have caused, alarm, harassment and distress, we can ban them from that area. And it makes it an offence for them even just to go back into that area. So they don't have to be going in and causing any antisocial behaviour the next time they're in there. They've been told by the court not to go there. And if you're an adult, there's a 5-year prison sentence is a top tariff for breaching that order. But we can look at things like curfews, I've said locations. We can talk about behaviour that's linked to antisocial driving. It's very broad, and it's a great piece of legislation that we can help to kind of control someone's behaviour and prevent them from causing future antisocial behaviour. The other piece of the legislation we use is what's called a closure order, a property closure order, which is really probably the one that keeps my team really, really busy. And there are two reasons. There is one around the antisocial behaviour that comes from a premise, and there's also the exploitation of vulnerable people because of the fact that they have access to a house. And what we do is we get drug dealers will go in, take over the address, will start selling drugs. They don't really care because it's not their house, so it doesn't matter that people are not quiet at 3 o'clock in the morning. They don't care that there's fights and there's drug paraphernalia outside in the street. And what's really good about the legislation, 2014, the legislation was changed so that we could actually leave the vulnerable people in the property. So before 2014, if we wanted to do a property closure, everybody had to be out of the property. And we could do that for up to 6 months. 2014 legislation now allows us, because we recognise that there are vulnerable people being exploited in their homes, that to make them homeless as well for 6 months is really not fair, because basically, their threats of violence, actual violence is happening by the exploiters to be able to use that property. So what we tend to do is put that closure order on. So again, we have to show to the court that there's been alarm, harassment, distress or crime happening in the location or near the location of that house. If the court are happy, they will put a closure order on, which basically means if we're looking at a partial closure order, we will close it for 3 months, but we will leave the tenant in there and we will do some wraparound work around that tenant who potentially has become even more vulnerable in the time that the drug dealers or the exploiters have been in there. And that's really probably the one that my team use quite a lot at the moment.
Yeah, we've had a question come in from Fiona White on Facebook with quite a good suggestion actually, which is about adopting a no wrong door policy, so that if the public ring a number to report antisocial behaviour, that they will always, their complaint or their report will always make its way to the right person, rather than being told it's not a police issue or it's not a local authority issue.
I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I know elsewhere in the country they have tried it. It would be lovely, and it's something we could consider. It is just about who would host that.
Yeah.
But that would be, great for everyone, not just for residents and victims, but also for practitioners to be able to kind of, because again, I think we recognise that it's really frustrating when you phone up and whoever you phone kind of says that's not really our issue, you need to speak to the council. People phone the council and the council say we can't deal with it, it's the police, and people get battered around, and that's just not acceptable. So to have that one place where actually say, do you know what, we've heard what you're saying, leave it with us, it's not an emergency, so you don't need an immediate response now, but what we will do is look at the most suitable person at that time to make contact with you. So it would be lovely, like with everything, it's funding and hosting, but who knows, maybe that's something we could trial in Surrey at some point.
I think it would be great, because again, things that we hear from victims a lot is that the number of times they've told their story before anything actually happens, or they feel that they're aware that anything's actually happened, and that's very frustrating for people. And in some cases, repeating the story actually reinforces the damage that it's done to them emotionally, because they're reliving it again and again. So I think it's a really great idea.
What would you say is one of the most sort of commonly held myths about antisocial behaviour? So things that get reported to you as antisocial behaviour that maybe aren't, or maybe an assumption that all antisocial behaviour is young people perpetrated and it's older people that are suffering it.
Yeah, I mean, from my team's point of view, we don't use that the legislation I've just talked about. Hardly ever use it on young people. Yeah. It is grown-ups that should know better. Yeah. And whilst I say they should know better, sometimes there are some underlying issues. So again, when we talk about tools and powers, that's not the first place we go to. If we're looking at them, we will have tried to do some prevention, some intervention with those individuals, and made sure that they're aware of the impact they're having, so they have the chance to change and to take that support. So I think that's kind of, I suppose, is one myth, is that we go straight to enforcement and we don't. I think, again, that's why it's really important that we get to know about it early enough. Yeah. Because sometimes, especially with the courts, they'll want to know what we've tried to do to change someone's behaviour, but that isn't always the best thing when you're living next door to that person or that person is impacting you, because you just want it to stop.
Can I say something about it? Because I think that is really important, that people understand that, because they're not always told everything that's going on. It doesn't mean nothing is happening. No. Because again, we hear that a lot, and sometimes when we get involved in the multi-agency approach, we may be aware that there is some intervention going on around mental health or alcohol use or something like that, but because of confidentiality we can't tell them that, and so that's quite frustrating for people, because they don't know what's going on. And it's easy to assume that nothing's happening. So I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. So that takes us on to our next video, and this one actually features one of our panellists, Jo, who's going to be talking to us about the community trigger.
Are you a victim of antisocial behaviour? Have you reported incidents to Surrey Police or to partner agencies, but feel that no one's listening and that actually the antisocial behaviour is getting worse or is continuing. If that's the case, you can ask for a community trigger. A community trigger is a lawful request to partner agencies which will have to review your concerns and your incidences and come up with a plan of action to help tackle the antisocial behaviour that you're experiencing. If you'd like further information on how to request a community trigger, please visit the Healthy Surrey website.
Right, before we move on to our discussion about the community trigger, we've had a query from Michelle Chinnery on Facebook, who is asking how Surrey Police make sure that victims of antisocial behaviour with a physical disability get the right support when they report antisocial behaviour to the police.
So there's two things that happen when you report to the police. So if you phone up or you're doing it online, the call taker has a risk assessment, it's a set of questions that are specific to antisocial behaviour. So they'll be different than if you're phoning up regarding a burglary or domestic abuse. So they're tied around asking the questions from the call taker can then make a decision. So again, we talked about the fact it's about the harm. So whilst the incident is quite important, actually the questions they'll be asking is, do you feel you're being targeted because of a physical disability or because of another issue? And they will ask you, how is it impacting you? So again, if you're the antisocial behaviour is as such that because you have a physical disability, it is making it harder for you to try and have a normal life, then those are the questions that they'll tease out. And then what happens is the call taker will do a risk assessment around kind of whether we need to get someone out to you now, or whether actually that goes to our safer neighbourhood teams, who will then come out, and they also have a risk assessment, which is probably a bit more an in-depth questionnaire around you as a victim, so that they can then truly understand what the impact is, what is going on in regards to yourselves, and then they can actually look at the best options to help us to tackle the antisocial behaviour and stop you being a victim.
Thanks, Jo. So now we're going to talk about the community trigger for a little while. I've had a bit of direct experience with community triggers myself because I've chaired a few community trigger panels. So just to refresh from the video, this is a process whereby if you've been a victim of antisocial behaviour and you have reported incidents multiple times and you feel that nothing's being done about it, or you feel that what's been done has not been effective, you can activate the trigger and request a review of your antisocial behaviour case. And what will happen is that the local community safety partnership will convene a panel, and their job is, it's not about finger pointing, it's not about blame, it's about looking at what action has been taken so far to resolve that antisocial behaviour and come up with an action plan of additional work that can be done to address it. It's been shown to be really quite effective, and in Surrey we found that quite often triggers that are put in don't necessarily meet the threshold that's set, but we feel that there is the potential for them to escalate and eventually meet the threshold, so we're more likely to adopt it, take it on and do some work around that to prevent it escalating. So Paul, I wonder if you want to give some kind of experience of triggers that you've dealt with in Spelthorne, and how you found the process.
Yeah, I think it's been a very useful process, and I would say this is a statutory process, so it's more or less raising I would say in simple terms, more of a formal complaint process. But the aim is, as Lou would say, it's not about complaints to get blamed, it's actually to help the victim, because that's what we're actually here, is to help the victim. We've held a few in Spelthorne, and I've chaired some for other local boroughs, and it's been interesting just to pick out sort of key themes and trends. And I would say the biggest thing, and it's probably picking up what Anne would probably say, is lack of communication to the victim.
Yeah.
Quite often they're not aware so much has been done. Sometimes we can't disclose some things for operational reasons, that's always a thing. The other big thing always comes out is information sharing, and sometimes agencies don't share information as well as they should. But we've been able to help some people, and I think resolve some, I would say, quite complicated and long-standing problems just by having a bit more of a focused look and a review. So to me, they're a useful thing to do.
Do you find that they're all pretty similar, or are they all completely different?
All completely different.
Yeah.
I think anyone would say that every incident of antisocial behaviour is unique, and so every resolution is unique as well. So
Yeah.
a wide variety from what I would call more traditional antisocial behaviour to more neighbour disputes, and with lots of subtleties in them as well. And it's really nice, and I really like Anne's and her team when they get involved, because a lot of it is about making the process of dispute resolution less adversarial. It's not as though people are winning or people are losing. It's about getting a suitable resolution for all.
Thanks, Paul. And Joe, from a police perspective, do you welcome the community trigger process? Is it something that's helpful? And
Yeah, well, as the ASB manager, it's probably one of the best things that came out of the 2014 Act was around the victim's voice, because before then, the victims of antisocial behaviour had no rights. I've already alluded to that you have no rights under the Victims Code at the moment. So what the trigger allows people to do is to, and as Paul's already talked about, it's not about finger kind of pointing or blaming, but it's about you as a victim having the right to be heard. And to be heard by a panel above maybe the people that you already kind of phoning up to report the antisocial behaviour. So it's almost like the level above potentially some of the housing officers or the local police officers or the environmental health officers who potentially have a bit more of a strategic overview of what can and can't be done. So for me, I think it's really important as police. We see it as a positive, not a negative, and we actually, again, as part of our training with Surrey Police, we advocate officers to mention it, and that's at the call-taking point of view and the police officer on the street. And I am quite strong with them, and what I say is that if someone is saying to us nobody's listening and they are frustrated, then show them where the community trigger page is. And what's more important is that actually you can, if you're supporting a victim of antisocial behaviour, you can raise that trigger on their behalf. So if you've got someone who is really scared and maybe is a little bit unconfident about putting pen to paper, filling out a form online, actually you can do it as the next door neighbour or as the brother or sister or the aunt or uncle, so that you can actually get their voice into that multi-agency arena. So we are, very strong advocates of it.
We do also mention it to anyone who we feel is expressing those views that they're not being heard, and we do provide a limited amount of support to people to signpost them to how to fill the form up and that kind of thing. And in some cases, we've been able to attend the trigger meetings as well to ensure that the victim's voice is heard there. I think what it really offers to people is having all the right people in who can make the decisions in the room at the same time and who can all look at things at the same time. And that is so difficult when you're dealing with hard-pressed officers dealing with a lot of work to actually get the link up and to get the communication going. So what the trigger offers is a way of making that happen. And I think that is very valuable to people.
Thanks, Anne. Right, we're now going to move on to our next video. A few weeks ago, we paid a visit to the Mighty Club in Tadworth. This is a community-run club offering a safe space for young people to spend time together and stay out of trouble. We're going to hear from Tony, the founder of the Mighty Club, on his reasons for investing in this project. He also talks about 15-year-old Lorcan, who recently started coaching football sessions at the Mighty Club on a Friday night. Having struggled at school, Lorcan has proved to be a revelation on the pitch, and staff are so impressed with his professionalism and excited for what his future holds. So we're going to watch that video now.
Recently my best friend's son passed away, Micah, and so the name Mighty came from the Micah Youth Team Incorporated, and it abbreviated Mighty. So that's pretty much my idea. Brought it to Steve, knowing a lot more about the charity sector than I did, said there was this building across the road that had been derelict for a while. From what I understood, there was no funding anyway, so we put our heads together. There was an opening where locals came together and just said, look, we'd like an idea who wanted to use the building type of thing. So we'd previously started up our company and we managed to put some funding in it. And then we wrote a business plan and brought it to the table. So we didn't turn up as Joe Bloggs, we turned up as the mighty incorporated team straight away, just showing that we were serious really. It wasn't just an epiphany, it was something that we'd already brought to life before coming to the table. And that's pretty much where it started. I came off of the estate, or I've been lived around here for pretty much my whole life. I wasn't the best of kids, so I wasn't very well behaved. I was not academic at all. I've always been on the tools. The fact is, the kids take ownership of it, you know, and the whole thing is about, like, it's not ours, it's the community, and then we're making sure the kids look after it. They even go around do litter picking because they understand that it's theirs. I mean, there's a thing on the internet where we had pictures taken. They couldn't, I think the council said to us, how did you manage to get 16 kids litter picking, you know? And just make it into a game, make it rewarding, and the reward is it's theirs at the end of the day. And every time we speak to them, we're saying, this is yours, look after it. And it seems to be going quite well.
The committee's kind of a children-based unit. We kind of have a voice for the kids, because sometimes the kids kind of get nervous to talk to an adult. It's a way for them to get away from home and get away to a place where they kind of can be themselves more than anything. Quite a few kids who just come here for the fun of it, because it's a very fun place. But it's kind of, if you think about it, most of the kids would either be at home on electronics and looking at social media, which isn't a great influence at this point. Most of the kids would be doing illegal things. People find somewhere where they can be welcomed and noticed. We just help people find who they choose to be and what they want to be.
Personally, I can relate to them. You know, I wasn't the best of kids at all, but boredom is a big thing. Being bored, you just, you know, you might pick a stone up, and it wasn't intentionally to break something. I threw it and it broke something. So most of the time, boredom is a big factor. So finding something for them to do, asking them what they want to do, being on their level, making eye contact, goes such a long way. So personally, I just think, you know, listening and finding time. I think everybody's capable of doing it, really. You know, it's just, yeah, that's it. We managed to raise £3,500 this week alone. I'm so passionate about it. I talk to my clients, I'm like, look, this is what I do in my spare time. I really appreciate it. And as opposed to getting that, here's a drink type of gesture, I'm like, actually, I'm running this in my local community. Any chance you can help out? And like, I think the generosity this week has been amazing, because I've said to him, like, we need, Steve told me we needed an additional 7,500 or something to run it during the summer holidays. And I've already managed to raise £3,500 in the first week that he told me about it. So, and there is nothing that I can say apart from thanks to my clients. What I hear about Lorcan is he apparently has no attention span, he can't concentrate, he's very disruptive. I don't see that here, not even in the slightest. What I see is what I relate to is that I was personally not academic. School wasn't for me, subletting my paper around by the time I was 9. I was left school by the time I was 14. It was just not for me. When he's here, he is I mean, I don't even have to say it. You could just watch him do it. His attention span, he's teaching others, he's got passion. You can't teach that in the classroom. That's just gifted. And he does it and wants to do it. And then if you went to him, oh yeah, I'm gonna pay you, he's gonna, oh yeah, brilliant, touch. You know, that's a completely different issue for him. He's not worried about the money. He wants to do it. Exactly, he wants to do it. So personally, I don't see what everybody else talks about. And on a separate note to this kids club, he recently done a day's work on the tools with me and was a completely different person then. Like, he didn't know anything, but at the end of the day, I was quizzing him. He's like, I know what that is, I remember that. And he came up into London with me, and the client was grateful for him to be there, and they were praising him. Didn't even know him, didn't even know the man. So I got nothing but high praise for him here, and like I say, I relate to maybe misbehaving because you can't communicate and you're finding things difficult on paper. But
that is just such a good example where the community has really come together to ensure that there's some, you know, positive activities for young people in their area. Joe, Joe, I know that you feel quite strongly about the fact that young people are often blamed for everything, and it's not always the case.
No, and I think it's National ASB Awareness Week, so now is the week to again, as I've already kind of said, my team deal mostly with adults, not with young people, and I think sometimes we forget that actually young people are more likely to be victims of antisocial behaviour and change the way they live their lives because of antisocial behaviour in their community. So I think it was really important that this week that actually we kind of show to everyone that actually young people can be part of the problem solving. You know, so whilst I'm not saying that all young people don't kind of push the boundaries and maybe get a little bit silly, but actually with the right intervention and the right mentors and by involving young people to help with the issue, you'll have some really positive outcomes.
We knew what
which,
you meant.
I know, it's late. Which is so much better than going down that enforcement route.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes communities more resilient. It makes them more stronger. So that next time there's a little bit of naughtiness, antisocial behaviour, people can check each other, you know, and do it that way. So that's why I think it was really important that we kind of talked about young people during this week.
And I know, Anne, your service offers a particular service, doesn't it, for families that may be struggling with challenging behaviour?
Yes, I think something Tony said really rang a bell with me, that around, you know, how you talk to young people and listen to young people, and that when you do that effectively and you do communicate well, then you bring out of them what you want to see in them rather than just judging them on the surface. So that really resonated with me. I mean, the service that we work, our intergenerational mediation service, which offers mediation for families who might be having a bit of difficulty in communication. And it's often around situations where parents have separated and got new families, and young people might feel a little bit unsure where they fit into things, or there's inconsistency between how people treat issues. And actually, that service that we offer is very effective in opening up communication. And actually, I think young people can really model direct and clear communication about what they need and what they would like to see in a way that we could all emulate. Yeah. So, I think we've got a lot to learn from them, really.
Yeah. Thanks, Anne. Right, we're now going to go into our final video, which is Ali Barlow talking about how Surrey Police tackles antisocial behaviour.
Surrey Police recognises the harm that antisocial behaviour causes not only to individuals but communities, so it's really important that you let us know what is going on. Did you know there's a number of ways that you can contact Surrey Police? If it's an emergency and there is a risk of real harm, then you must call us via 999, which is our emergency number. You can also call us via 101, which is our non-emergency number, or online through our website. Surrey Police also has a digital 101 desk, which you can see here being looked after today by James and Julie. We respond to people on Facebook, Twitter and live chat, so you can report your antisocial behaviour through those means too. They work alongside the call handlers and it's a 24/7 service. When you report your antisocial behaviour, you'll be asked a series of questions so we can determine the very best response. It may be that we need to deploy officers there and then, or it could be that we refer the antisocial behaviour to one of our safer neighbourhood teams, or we may pass the details on to one of our partners. Either way, it's really important that you do contact us. Police aren't always the right people to call about ASB. For example, if you are having problems with a neighbour and they are a tenant, it may be better to talk to the landlord about the issues that you're experiencing. If it's environmental antisocial behaviour, such as noise and litter, it may be that you're better to call your local authority, who have very strong powers and tools to use to deal with those types of antisocial behaviour issues. There's a wealth of information on the Healthy Surrey website, so please do take a look, and please do not suffer in silence. Antisocial behaviour is important and we're here to help you.
So before we wrap up tonight, Joe, I think you've got one final thing that you'd like to say.
Yeah, I think what I want to say to everyone that's listening today, whether you're a victim, supporting a victim, or you're not a victim at the moment but potentially you may experience antisocial behaviour. Please don't suffer in silence. Nationally, we're told that 50% of people that experience antisocial behaviour don't report. We want to change that, and that's why ASB Awareness Week is really important to us. And remember that community trigger. So if you feel you're not being listened to, you have reported it, and the incidents are carrying on, then seek out how you apply for a community trigger.
So thank you everyone for tuning in this evening. We hope you found the conversation informative and helpful. We thank everybody that sent questions in. If you want to know more about antisocial behaviour, if you go to the Surrey Healthy Surrey website, you can just Google Healthy Surrey, or alternatively you can Google Surrey Community Safety. It will take you to the same place. You'll find that there is a whole antisocial behaviour section on there. It gives you lots of information about what is and isn't antisocial behaviour, who deals with what, how to report specific types of antisocial behaviour. It also gives information about the community trigger process and how you can activate that and access it. So please do use that. Obviously, in an emergency where it feels like a situation could get heated or violent, particularly if you're in dispute with neighbours, for example, or someone is in immediate danger, always dial 999. If you're deaf or hard of hearing, you can report using the text phone service on 18000, or you can text on 999 if you've pre-registered with the emergency SMS service. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we're now moving on to Dog of the Week.
My name is Emma Coles and I am the Kennel and Breeding Manager at Surrey and Sussex Police Dog School. The last litter of dogs that we bred at the dog school were a litter of Labradors. All of them were black Labradors and they are called our U litter. They consisted of 9 puppies, 5 boys and 4 girls. This particular litter of dogs will be developed as search dogs. They are trained to detect a number of different things, which include drugs, explosives. Some are trained as victim recovery dogs, cash, firearms, and we now have digital dogs as well. Any breeding stock that we use at the dog school is health checked. So all of our dogs that we use for breeding are health screened to a Kennel Club assured breeder level. So all of them have X-rays, DNA tests, and also have eye tests. So one of our puppies, Yuri, tested fantastically in the assessment. He was socially confident, environmentally confident, extremely interested in the tennis ball, happy to run out, pick up a tennis ball, confident in holding the ball, bringing it back and interacting with the handler. And he was also very good at using his brain and problem solving when we put him through the last part of the assessment. I would say that Yuri's character, he's probably the cheekiest of the litter. He was the first one to get out of the whelping box and run around the kitchen. He was always stealing things off the side, quite bolshy with his litter mates and always out and wanting to do more. He's settled well with the puppy walkers. He has been a little bit noisy overnight, so I think for them it's like having a new baby in the house again. But he's settling really well. He's cheeky, he's happy, he's into absolutely everything, and he's certainly keeping everybody busy and on their toes. He is due to come in for his first training session at the end of the month, and we're really looking forward to seeing how he's getting on. So at 7 weeks of age, 49 days, we run the litter of puppies through an assessment. The search dog assessment consists of 4 different elements that we're looking at. The first being how social the puppy is and how socially confident the puppy is around new people. We also need to mark how confident the puppy is in a new environment. So we're looking at social and environmental confidence, and that plays a huge part on the puppy's assessment and whether or not they're suitable for police work. After Yuri had his 7-week assessment, he was then microchipped, and then he had a full health check by the vet, and he was given a clean bill of health along with all of his litter mates. He then had his first of 3 injections that he needed to have, and he was very brave. He took it like a champ.
done.
What have you been doing? What are you doing? Yes.
It's so funny when you're carrying them around.
Oh,
You
they're
can
little
feel it
figures.
ripping
Yeah.
at the back.
You're a little wiggler. Yay. Oh.
Bye. Thanks for having me. Thanks for looking after me. Karen.